The story begins with a boy awakening in complete darkness. He opens his eyes, but he cannot see absolutely anything, becoming confused and without any idea of where he is. For a few moments, everything remains empty, until he notices a faint glow slowly appearing in front of him. Little by little, this light intensifies, and he realizes that it comes from inside what seems to be an eggshell. Part of this shell is cracked, creating a small opening that allows him to see the outside. Through it, he notices that he is in the middle of a forest. This only raises even more questions, especially when he realizes that he cannot move his own body in any way at all. Before he can organize his thoughts, a status screen suddenly appears in front of him. Upon reading the information, he becomes completely frozen in shock. Because the system clearly indicates that he is a dragon egg, the confusion only increases. Soon after, the status window expands, now fully visible, and a divine voice announces that this interface displays all of his current abilities, accompanied by numerical values to make understanding easier. Still disoriented, he tries to speak to the divine voice, demanding an explanation for what is happening. However, the voice calmly responds that it still cannot explain everything, because he is still at level 1. This answer only makes him more irritated. In an act of frustration, he tries to move and ends up lightly shaking his body, which causes him to fall from the tree where he was resting. He hits the ground and begins rolling uncontrollably down a slope until he finally falls into a river. When he stops there, he realizes that he can see his reflection in the water. When he looks closely, he is shocked to notice that his reflected image is, in fact, a dragon egg. Realizing how lost he is, the divine voice decides to help him a little more and finally offers him a proper explanation. It confirms that he truly is a dragon egg, classified in that world as a rank F monster. If his shell were to be completely broken, he would die instantly, which means that creating that small opening to see had already been extremely dangerous. The divine voice continues explaining that, despite dragon eggs being at the base of the food chain, they possess the potential to grow and become terrifying dragons over time. However, this is only possible if they manage to survive long enough, which is not easy, since dragon eggs are considered a highly prized delicacy by various monsters. As they obviously do not have legs, the only form of locomotion is rolling. Even after hearing all of this, he still cannot fully understand what is happening to him. Remaining still seems extremely risky, so he decides to start rolling as fast as he can, trying to move away from danger. Unfortunately, this causes him to fall again. Plunging from a small cliff, he realizes that he has been falling quite a lot lately, and because of this, the system announces that his endurance has increased from level 1 to level 2. Even so, the fall reduces his hit points, reminding him that he needs to be more careful. Upon realizing that he is injured and exhausted, he decides to sleep for a while to recover his strength. As expected, when he wakes up, his hit points are completely restored. This confirms that resting fully recovers his health bar, which brings him a small sense of relief in this strange and dangerous situation. After that, he continues rolling while reflecting to himself, imagining what exactly will happen when he finally leaves that form. He wonders if one day he will become a gigantic dragon, and if he will be forced to fight alone against relentless enemies just to survive. As he moves forward, lost in his thoughts, he suddenly stops when he notices a giant insect not very far away. Sensing danger, he quickly hides behind a tree and uses his appraisal ability. The result reveals that the creature is called an egg devourer. As soon as the insect notices him, it immediately advances in his direction, making it clear that it intends to kill him. He begins to roll as fast as he can, but soon realizes that he will not be able to escape forever. Maintaining that pace, sooner or later he would be caught. With this, he understands that he needs to find a way to turn the tables. The monster chases him to the edge of a cliff. At the moment when the creature leaps toward him, trying to swallow him whole, he dodges at the last second. Using all the strength he has, he collides with the monster and manages to push it off the cliff. The creature plunges down the slope and dies instantly. That becomes the first battle he has ever won in his entire life. The system immediately announces that he has gained 12 experience points and that he has now reached level 5. As a result, all of his statistics are completely maximized. In addition, he meets the requirements to evolve, receiving the option to choose between becoming a baby dragon or a small dragon. Not knowing exactly what the difference is, the system explains, the small dragon is described as a common race of dragons, considered small only in comparison to others of the same species. Even so, when fully developed, it is still larger than a bear and is known for its powerful fire breath. The baby dragon, on the other hand, is not well suited for combat, due to its short claws and small fangs, but it possesses enormous potential, being able to evolve into several different species of dragons in the future. However, baby dragons are considered an extremely valuable delicacy, both for monsters and for adventurers, which means that they are constantly hunted wherever they appear. Faced with this, the choice of the small dragon seems obvious, since it is the safest option for survival. However, soon after making his decision, the divine voice envelops him in a warm manner and tells him not to limit himself, explaining that it has great expectations for him and that he should always strive for something greater. Upon hearing this, he feels confused and begins to wonder if he truly made the right choice. After all, he chose the safest option, not the riskiest one, as he recalls how the system works. This doubt continues to echo in his mind. The divine voice had mentioned that the baby dragon possessed enormous potential, capable of evolving in many different ways in the future. Thinking about this, he begins to suspect that the small dragon might have a more limited evolutionary path, or that, after a certain point, it might no longer be able to grow fully. This idea keeps pounding in his mind. Taking this into consideration, he finally makes his decision and chooses to evolve into a baby dragon. He does not want to live with regrets later on, even knowing that this choice may be dangerous. He prefers to take the risk rather than wonder in the future if it was fear that made him limit himself. He wants to believe that the decision was truly his, without deceiving himself or choosing the easiest path merely for the sake of safety. The system accepts his choice without hesitation and carries out the evolution immediately. His body begins to change, undergoing a visible transformation until it takes on the form of a small yellow dragon, exactly as he had chosen. Along with the evolution, he acquires a large number of new abilities, and all of his previous statistics increase significantly compared to what they were before. Even so, his hit points and mana do not recover automatically after the evolution. He remains exhausted, which makes it clear that he will need to rest before exerting himself again. Almost at the same instant he realizes this, his stomach growls loudly, making it evident that he also needs to eat as soon as possible. When he looks toward the place where he defeated the creature earlier, he realizes that the worm he killed now looks surprisingly appetizing. He understands that, if he wants to continue growing stronger, he will need protein. With this thought, his dragon instincts awaken completely. Without hesitation, he devours the worm. After that, he lies down and falls asleep. When he wakes up the next morning, he feels full of energy, renewed after a good night of rest. He then heads to the river to observe his reflection. At that moment, he finally accepts that he was reincarnated in that world. What intrigues him the most, however, is the fact that he has no memories of his previous life. He does not know who he was, how he lived, or even whether he was a boy or a girl. All of that simply disappeared. While reflecting on this, he notices movement behind him and turns around, spotting several dark worms approaching. This time, instead of fleeing, he charges straight into the attack. Using his new abilities, he defeats the first wave quickly. As he continues fighting, he unlocks even more skills, making the combat increasingly simple and efficient. After defeating them all, hunger returns. However, he has no desire to eat those dark worms, as he remembers the horrible taste from the last time. Then, he finds some mushrooms nearby and decides to try them. This decision soon proves to be a mistake, as he quickly discovers that they are poisonous. After suffering from the effects, he decides that he will never eat mushrooms again. With this lesson learned, he ventures deeper into the forest in search of better prey, since he does not want to survive by feeding only on worms. After exploring for a while, he finds a gray wolf. Even though it is larger than him, the dragon manages to use his weak breath and dragon punch to defeat it. After the victory, he lightly burns the wolf's hide. When he smells it, he realizes that it resembles barbecue. Driven by curiosity, he uses his dragon breath again to roast the meat more thoroughly. When he finally takes a bite, he discovers that the flavor is incredible. Later, he encounters another gray wolf and defeats it almost instantly. With that, he reaches level 20 out of 25, realizing that he still needs to gain 5 more levels in order to evolve again. As soon as the wolf falls, he repeats the previous process, showing that he is already starting to get used to the life of a dragon. Hunting, fighting, and eating in this way begins to feel natural. Even so, despite growing stronger, he feels the weight of loneliness. The only voice he speaks with is the divine voice, and this starts to leave him bored and isolated. He is surprised to realize that he wishes he had a friend by his side. That desire is fulfilled faster than he imagined. A short time later, he hears voices coming from afar. He cannot understand the language being spoken, but he feels relieved to recognize them as human voices. Quickly, he hides behind a tree and observes carefully. He sees a small group of adventurers approaching. At first, he thinks about revealing himself and trying to communicate, but he soon remembers that he is a dragon. Fear arises of being attacked as soon as he is seen. Even so, he thinks that, because he is small, he might appear harmless or even cute. He even considers that they might treat him like a pet. Filled with hope, he steps out from behind the tree and places himself in front of them, trying to appear as adorable and harmless as possible. Unfortunately, the plan fails completely. The adventurers do not see him as something innocent, but rather as prey and valuable meat. Without hesitation, the leader of the group attacks him, plunging the sword into his chest. Immediately afterward, the man uses magic that numbs his entire body, preventing him from moving normally. He desperately tries to escape, but his muscles do not respond due to the paralysis. Helpless, he watches the adventurers slowly approach, clearly preparing to kill him. At that moment, he realizes how naive he was to believe that a dragon could befriend humans. After all the effort to survive and evolve, it seems that everything is about to end in a cruel and meaningless way. Just as the leader raises his weapon to deliver the final blow, a female adventurer steps forward and stops him. She questions whether it is really necessary to kill such a small, cute, and innocent-looking dragon. Confused, the protagonist wonders why he is still alive. A few seconds later, he feels a sensation of warmth spreading throughout his body. When he lifts his gaze, he realizes that the adventurer is using healing magic. He quickly uses his appraisal ability and discovers that her name is Miriam. Even though she is almost out of mana, she decides to heal him completely. While Miriam speaks to him, the system announces that he has acquired the human language comprehension skill, allowing him to gradually understand the language as the skill's level increases. However, this brief moment of calm and kindness does not last long. Suddenly, screams echo in the distance, loud and desperate. Miriam immediately recognizes those voices as belonging to her companions. Without thinking twice, she tries to run toward the sound to help them. Before she can get away, he grabs her arm tightly, clearly showing how distressed he is. He tries to stop her, warning that whatever is happening ahead is far too dangerous for her to face alone. Even so, Miriam breaks free and runs, ignoring the warning and leaving him behind. Watching her leave, the protagonist realizes that he cannot simply stand still while the girl who saved his life is in danger. Gathering his courage, he forces his body to move and runs after her. When he finally reaches the location, his heart sinks at the sight before his eyes. Miriam is facing a terrible monster, a stone dragon, classified as a level C enemy. The situation is even worse when he realizes that the creature has 197 hit points, which means that an absurd amount of damage would be required to defeat it. Miriam is already injured. At the moment she screams, the stone dragon turns all of its attention toward him, staring at that gigantic creature that is now watching him directly. He feels fear take over his body. His muscles lock up. His mind falls into conflict, and he wonders if this is how everything will end. Unable to move, paralyzed by terror and doubt, he feels that he is standing at the edge of the end, and thus, the first episode comes to an end. Luckily, Dragu manages to dodge the attack at the very last instant. As he moves, he thinks that he made a huge mistake by believing that the four of them could defeat that creature. When he was a child, he would never have imagined something like this. As he looks at Miriam, he realizes that she has very few hit points left, and, to make matters worse, the small dragon begins to advance slowly in her direction. Desperate, Dragu tries to help her, but he is interrupted by a voice that echoes, ordering him to run away. It insists that he leave immediately, because facing that creature is impossible. Dragu understands perfectly, without any doubt, there is no real chance of victory. Even knowing that the voice is right, he cannot abandon the girl. He decides, then, to do everything within his power. He starts rolling quickly across the ground, dodging the monster's attacks with such precision that he looks like a true master of evasion. In a short time, he realizes that the older man in the group is already dead. The other companion is still breathing, but he is unconscious and bleeding. Dragu understands that he needs to draw the monster away somehow. Without wasting time, he advances, rolling and attacking to provoke the creature. The dragon, which is small in name only, becomes enraged and begins to chase him. At least, that was what Dragu expected. However, the monster activates one of its abilities, causing a massive earthquake that leaves him completely immobilized. Dragu complains, realizing that that miserable creature is far too strong. Filled with rage, he throws a punch with his fist wrapped in flames, but the dragon simply activates its regeneration, recovering all of its hit points with extreme ease. At that moment, Dragu understands that there is nothing more he can do there. In the end, he decides to grab Miriam and flee from the place. There is no way to save everyone, but at least he can save one life. He carries her with him, moving away from the danger zone. Already far from there, he watches with concern as Miriam's HP continues to drop and, unfortunately, he has no healing abilities. Even so, Miriam is human, and that means there is a solution. If he wants to save her, he needs to take her to a human village. Following a faint, characteristic scent, Dragu hurries on, but soon realizes that the path is surrounded by a pack of gray wolves. They encircle them quickly, leaving no room to escape. With no alternative, Dragu fights the wolves to drive them away. During the struggle, Miriam briefly opens her eyes and, in a confused state, sees the small Dragu struggling against the beasts. Soon after, she loses consciousness again. As the night continues to advance, Dragu keeps carrying Miriam, already at the limit of his strength. By luck, he manages to reach the village. Without wasting time, he begins shouting for help, asking the villagers for assistance. However, they only hear roars and, feeling threatened, they attack, wounding his leg with a blade. Trying to make them understand, he realizes that it is useless. Then, he abandons Miriam's body, trusting that they will be able to help her, and quickly flees back into the forest. As he moves away, he understands that the more he tries to approach humans, the more they will see him only as a dragon, a monster. As if that were not enough, the voice of God appears once again, informing him that he has received a new title, rising from the insignificant level of Hero 1. 2 days pass, and Miriam finally awakens. Confused, she wonders where she is, until she notices a red-haired elf by her side. Realizing that she is in a village, the elf, named Muriel, explains that she used excessive white magic to heal her, and that now Miriam needs to rest. Miriam asks who brought her there and what happened to her companions. Muriel replies that the dwarf is dead, found as if he had been crushed by an enormous rock. As for the others, their bodies were not located, and everything indicates that they were devoured. Miriam collapses to the ground, crying, realizing that she is the only survivor. She blames herself, believing that she could have prevented everything. Muriel asks her to calm down, explaining that God has always done whatever he wanted. What matters is that she is alive now, thanks to someone who saved her. Muriel says that the dwarf was a good person, responsible for driving monsters away from the village and serving as an example for the children. However, one night, she heard comments at the tavern saying that he would never defeat a stone dragon. Offended, he decided to prove them wrong, practically killing himself out of pride. Because of that, he dragged GR and Miriam into forming a group, taking advantage of Muriel's absence and falsely claiming that he had her permission. Miriam knew that Muriel had warned them not to go near the dragon, but she ended up giving in to the pressure and her sense of guilt. She says that she agreed to accompany them only on the condition that they would retreat if the situation became dangerous. Unfortunately, things did not go as planned. Muriel states that the dwarf died because of his pride and congratulates Miriam for surviving such severe injuries. Excited, Miriam states that someone must certainly have carried her to the village. Muriel dismisses that idea, saying that they found signs of a monster attacking the village entrance, but that Gregory's group managed to repel the threat. Miriam insists that she passed out during the fight and that it is impossible for her to have escaped on her own. Muriel tries to convince her that strong blows can cause memory loss. Miriam accepts the possibility, but as she remembers Dragu fighting the wolves, she asks Muriel what those creatures were like. The monster that had been beside her was no longer there, although Miriam could not explain the reason. When they noticed its absence, they realized that it had simply disappeared. Maria asks whether Miriam is worried about something, but she prefers not to go into details. Even so, the subject continues to circle her thoughts, especially when she wonders whether that monster could be the same small dragon she had run into before. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Dragu gets up as if nothing had happened. He silently thanks the metabolism of dragons, along with a good period of rest. In his thoughts, he hopes that the girl is doing well. When he recalls the battle, he acknowledges that he was extremely weak in that confrontation. He believed that after evolving he would already be a bit stronger. But that fight revealed an absurd difference between him and a dragon, even one considered small. This awakens in Dragu a strong desire to become far more powerful. He feels that the time has come to act. With a change of scenery, he uses an egg eater to summon his allies, thus creating a perfect opportunity to gain experience. At that moment, the voice of God announces that he has received the title of the Path of Evil, something that leaves him slightly offended. Dragu quickly defeats the egg eaters, rises to level 25, and once again meets the requirements to evolve. Seeking the best place for the transformation, he goes to a lake and agrees to view the evolution options presented by the voice of God. 5 paths appear: Calamity, Marbleys, Angelic Child, Small Dragon, and Dragon Hatchling. The voice explains that the small dragon grows quickly and is safer at the beginning, but has limited potential, while the Dragon Hatchling offers a much more promising future. Dragu also analyzes the other options: the Child Dragon, his natural and safest evolution; the Marbleys one, focused on durability and mana; and the Angelic Dragon, with healing abilities but little offensive power. The juvenile Calamity represents the beginning of an evil path, although a reversible one. Even reluctant about the idea of becoming a Calamity, Dragu finds himself intrigued upon learning that this type of dragon is extremely intelligent and can assume a humanoid form, allowing it to infiltrate among humans. Still bothered by the meaning of this choice, he ends the chapter undecided, reflecting on which path to follow. He reflects on the idea of becoming a young plague dragon, and soon concludes that this might not be such a smart choice, since wherever he looks, that kind of power still frightens him. His greatest concern continues to be Miria's, and because of that, he wishes, no matter what happens, to obtain the ability of human transformation. After thinking for a long time, the protagonist comes to the conclusion that if he could learn this transformation, he might be able to experience a simple and righteous life. Even if everything went wrong, there would always be the possibility of turning back. With that in mind, he makes a sudden decision and chooses to evolve into a young plague dragon. His body transforms immediately, accompanied by the divine voice, which announces his evolution from a baby plague dragon to a higher stage. Despite it being exactly what he had chosen, the protagonist looks at his reflection in the water and feels his confidence waver. He no longer resembles the small, adorable dragon he used to be. The more he observes himself, the more his appearance seems dark and threatening. The divine voice then informs him that his status has increased from level 2 to level 3, now allowing him to review the details of his abilities. The level of the divine voice itself has also risen from 1 to 2, and he has acquired the abilities of flight and dragon scale dust. Upon hearing this, the protagonist feels satisfied for a moment. However, the divine voice continues, explaining that his bite has evolved into venomous fangs, that he has obtained a dark and sickening breath, as well as claws with paralyzing poison. All of these abilities sound extremely dangerous. He responds to the divine voice by saying that he did not need any of that. But it goes on to inform him that he also received the title of friendship, and that the curse increased from level 1 to level 2. With so much information, the protagonist begins to think that this decision might have been a huge mistake. To make matters worse, there is no mention at all of the long-awaited human transformation. This makes him think that he has ended up becoming something close to death itself, although he tries to convince himself that he might simply need to gain more levels to unlock that ability. The divine voice, however, states that it cannot provide explanations of that kind at level 3. Defeated, the protagonist feels miserable as he realizes that he gained so many strange abilities instead of the human transformation he desired. He then decides to review everything on his own and tries to learn more about the divine voice ability, questioning whose voice it truly is. The answer is direct. Explanations of that kind cannot be given at this level. Something he already suspected. Faced with that, he decides to analyze other abilities, such as dragon scale dust. The divine voice explains that when the dragon flaps its wings, it spreads a debilitating miasma that affects everything around it. At higher levels, this power would be capable of annihilating entire nations simply by flying over them. The protagonist carefully moves his wings, but that simple action kills a nearby flower, causing him to panic. He does not like the idea of being a walking biological weapon at all and complains that a warning would have been useful. The dust came out just from the movement of his wings, something that would never have happened if he were still human. The explanation continues with the sickening breath, described as an attack that spreads a disease-laden miasma. It not only causes severe illnesses, but is also extremely contagious, and, in the past, was responsible for the complete destruction of an entire civilization. Upon hearing this, the protagonist falls into complete despair, saying that nothing could possibly be more evil than that and wondering whether he will still be able to follow a righteous path. He then decides to analyze his titles, since they seem to strongly influence his evolution. The divine voice explains that hero is a title granted to those who represent modest and kind values, and who may one day become true heroes. This title slightly increases damage with certain weapons and has a strong impact on the evolutionary path. The protagonist does not reject this idea, as he believes it might prevent him from following an evil path. Next, the divine voice describes the title of malefactor, intended for cruel villains who leave piles of corpses behind. It slightly increases the damage of dark attacks, makes learning white magic more difficult, and reduces the overall recovery rate, while also strongly influencing evolution. Upon hearing this, the protagonist interrupts the explanation, stating that this is the worst ability he has ever heard of in his entire life. He begins to seriously believe that he made the wrong choice. Desperate, he asks the divine voice to take him back and says that he wants to return to being an innocent baby, deeply regretting his decision. Meanwhile, Mariel and Miriam check all the stones that protect the village. Mariel explains that these stones create a barrier that prevents monsters from entering, but in truth, the enchantment only subconsciously discourages them. Creatures with strong will or clear objectives can still pass through the protection. Miria supposes that this includes the monsters seen the other day, but Mariel states that there is no certainty, since no one saw it clearly. Even so, Miria believes that it might have been trying to help, especially after seeing it fight against the wolves. Mariel comments that if it had entered the village, it would mean the spell was broken, which would be a serious problem. But it would also indicate that it could return. Because of that, they decide to move on to the next enchantment and check whether everything is in order. After finishing, Miria asks if she can learn more about monsters, but Mariel notes that she has been strangely obsessed with them since the incident. Miria confesses that she cannot get out of her head the feeling of having been saved by a small dragon in the forest. Mariel immediately interrupts her, asking whether she might be developing feelings for a monster. Miria quickly denies it, although she hesitates for a brief moment. Despite her insecurity, Mariel decides to explain more about monsters. She says that they can evolve into different forms, growing stronger with each evolution, which happens by hunting other creatures. They level up, just like humans, who also possess their own levels. Miriam comments that humans can also evolve, improve their abilities, and level up by accumulating experience. Mariel confirms this and explains that, in the case of monsters, each species has a different maximum limit. When they reach that limit, they evolve into a higher form. This process repeats itself several times and, as time goes on, monsters take on increasingly powerful appearances. Miriam says it is hard to believe that people in the past managed to understand the true nature of monsters. Mariel then asks what she is talking about, since that explanation had already been given before and the event mentioned happened only 11 years ago. Miriam admits that she does not remember any of that, because at the time she was only 5 years old and still knew very little about the world. Mariel agrees that she is right, and Miriam comments that she was so small back then that she had to look up to see her. Mariel responds with an irritated look. Miriam quickly realizes that she touched on a sensitive topic, since Mariel is sensitive when it comes to her height. Even if that is probably true, Mariel denies it and completely changes the subject. She explains that, from time to time, special people appear who are capable of hearing the divine voice, which shares information about monsters, levels, and other similar matters. As happens with heroes or saints, it was thanks to these people that such knowledge spread, and not through simple trial and error. Monsters fight to survive, gain experience, and seek evolution. In other words, they are all driven to seek power and become more ferocious. Even if that dragon saved Miriam's life, the next time their paths cross, it will have evolved into something far more dangerous and will turn its fangs and claws against her. Miriam tries to say something, but stops halfway through. Mariel warns her not to create strange expectations regarding monsters. They are the embodiment of the instinct to fight, and that makes them incompatible with humans. Miriam has no choice but to accept those words, thinking that even that small dragon who saved her will one day change as it evolves. Meanwhile, the protagonist decides to level up as quickly as possible and return to the path he has chosen. After all, he intends to become a hero, not a demon king. To begin with, he wants to learn about human transformation and go to the city, because he wants to see her again, especially Miriam. Without wasting time, he starts searching for weaker monsters around him to gain experience quickly. Suddenly, moving becomes difficult. He notices threads wrapping around his body, preventing any movement. At that moment, he senses the presence of a huge monster behind him, but it is not the type of spider he had imagined. The protagonist quickly checks his attributes and discovers that it is an extremely powerful Taranturok. He understands that he has no chance of defeating it now. But before he can even try to flee, the spider fires its web. Immediately, he uses his baby dragon breath to burn the threads, but ends up setting his own body on fire in the process. While rolling on the ground trying to put out the flames, the divine voice announces that he has acquired fire resistance. As soon as he manages to stand up, he quickly advances to check how much damage he dealt to the spider. The Taranturok still has 62 health points out of a total of 78, which shows that the attack was not as effective as he had hoped. With few options left, he decides to use his claws, activating the poisonous and paralyzing claws ability for the first time. After attacking repeatedly, he retreats and checks his own status, realizing that he now has only 42 health points. The Taranturok's condition shows light exhaustion, partial paralysis, and total fury, which is definitely not a good sign. The protagonist does not understand how this is possible, since the spider still has half of its life remaining. He realizes that he has only made the situation worse. Deciding that he needs to get out of there immediately, while the monster is still partially paralyzed, he uses his rolling ability to escape. However, the paralysis quickly fades, and the enraged spider begins chasing him. At that moment, he remembers that he can fly, but his small wings do not allow him to go very far. He becomes confused when he cannot actually fly, which indicates that his level is still low. With no time to think, he uses the rolling ability again to flee. After 10 full minutes of non-stop rolling, the spider is still chasing him, showing no signs of fatigue. The divine voice informs him that the rolling ability has increased from level 2 to level 3. This gives him a bit of hope, and he starts to believe that he can survive, since he is now faster. The divine voice then announces that he has received the title of Running Chicken. The protagonist immediately asks if that means he is being called a coward. He explains that he would face the spider if he had any chance of winning. But that is clearly not the case. The situation worsens when he realizes that he is approaching a cliff and knows that a fall would certainly kill him. He thinks about turning right before the edge, but soon considers that he might be able to escape if he reaches the other side. Even knowing that his flying ability is unreliable, he decides to jump with all the speed he can muster, betting everything on that attempt. At the highest point of the jump, he opens his wings and tries to use the wind in his favor to reach the other side. To his surprise, it works better than expected. He manages to escape, although he is completely exhausted. The protagonist believes he has shaken off the spider, but panics when he realizes that it has created a bridge of webs to continue the pursuit. Forced to flee desperately, he crashes through several monsters along the way, gaining large amounts of experience thanks to his special title, which causes him to quickly rise to level 8. Feeling stronger, he decides to stop running and finally face the spider. After analyzing his abilities and enduring a powerful poison thanks to the resistance he acquired, the protagonist deceives the spider by pretending to be dead and defeats it with a decisive tail attack. The victory takes him straight to level 14. In addition to unlocking new abilities, although the long-awaited human transformation still does not appear, which leaves him frustrated. Exhausted, he finds a cave and decides to use it as a base. There, he prepares an improvised meal with strange fruits that improve the flavor of the meat, which unexpectedly earns him the title of Lord Chef. Despite being satisfied, he reflects bitterly on his monstrous appearance, and the fact that he is now seen as an enemy of humanity. Meanwhile, in the village, Miriam becomes worried upon learning that two figures were seen near a lake. Even though she wants to go search for them, she is stopped by Mariel, who decides to ask the guild for help. The next day, the protagonist wakes up recovered, but strange problems arise when he tries to view his own status. After intense pain, his ability evolves once again, although his vision remains blurred, ending the episode with even more mysteries surrounding his new form. The young woman insists on entering the forest no matter what, showing an almost stubborn determination. However, her friend immediately objects, stating that this would be a terrible idea, since she would not be able to do anything on her own inside there. The forest is far too dangerous, full of monsters and unknown risks. The girl, however, responds firmly that Dops is still alive, and that she feels this deep in her heart. Faced with this statement, her friend questions why he has not returned to the village after so much time. The young woman admits that she does not know the exact reason, only that something prevents her from giving up. Her friend, being more rational, comments that she will ask the villagers for help to form an organized search party. For that reason, she asks her to stop wanting to go into the forest alone all the time, because they cannot put the lives of other people in the village at risk because of an impulsive decision. Thus, she decides that the best course of action is to request that the guild investigate the case, since the adventurers should arrive soon to help. Upon hearing this, the girl realizes that she acted rashly and apologizes for her irrational behavior. The scene shifts to Dragon, who wakes up in a good mood, quite satisfied for having managed to sleep deeply and also feed properly after such a long time. His body feels stronger and more stable, and this excites him. Now, he decides that it is time to evolve once again and try, at last, to reach the long-desired human transformation. As he walks, he carefully observes the environment around him. Looking ahead, he notices something strange on the ground, a suspicious-looking slime. He begins to wonder what exactly that might be. He is certain that it cannot be just an ordinary puddle of water and, driven by curiosity, decides to get closer to find out what it is. Even so, he remains cautious, imagining that it could be some kind of monster. As he gets closer, he realizes that the creature does not seem as strong as other enemies he has already faced. This makes him think that he could use that being to farm experience points. With this idea in mind, he decides to check the creature's attributes. However, as soon as he tries to observe its statistics, His head begins to ache intensely, and his eyes burn. A system message echoes in his mind, informing him that the ability to view statistics still does not provide an accurate reading at level 3. Shortly after, as a response to the forced attempt, his ability rises to level 4. Even so, the boy feels intrigued, wondering what kind of monster is actually standing before him. Without any warning, the beast lunges forward and attacks him by surprise. Startled, he runs away and quickly hides behind a tree, trying to catch his breath. He understands that this is not something he should deal with carelessly. Even so, he remembers that the attributes he managed to see were not impressive at all. Still, he decides to avoid a direct confrontation for the time being and continues walking through the forest. Shortly afterward, he finds something on the ground and thinks, for a moment, that it might just be an abandoned bucket of apples. However, when he touches the object, he discovers too late that it is a disguised monster, taking a direct hit to the face. When he checks its statistics, he realizes that it is a rank D monster. Determined to defeat it, he advances and uses his strongest attack, but is surprised to notice that the creature is far more resistant than he had imagined, taking only 1 point of damage. When he tries to grab it to finish off the rest of its life, he realizes that the monster has completely regenerated. Even by pushing himself to the limit, he cannot deal any damage at all. Frustrated, he begins to wonder if that creature might not know how to swim and decides to test this possibility. By throwing the monster into the sea, he finally manages to defeat it, gaining 36 experience points. Thanks to the effect of the little walking egg, he receives extra experience points, leveling up from level 14 to level 15. In addition, he receives the title of Despicable King, and the Malefactor skill rises from level 2 to level 3. Before he can even react, the Snail Gang appears to avenge their defeated companion. He realizes that, while falling into the sea, the monster had used some ability to communicate with the others. Even so, without feeling fear, he decides to attack head-on. He knocks one of them down quickly and, with a single powerful blow, defeats all the others with extreme ease. Soon after, he receives the Meteorite skill, feeling satisfied that this attack now officially counts as a skill. After defeating all the monsters before him, he gains 595 experience points. Because of the Walking Egg's title, he jumps directly from level 15 to level 30. His flight skill goes from level 1 to level 2, and the ability to view statistics rises from level 4 to level 5. The dragon feels quite satisfied for having shattered the enemy's shells and, at the same time, obtained enough meat and evolved several levels all at once. However, at that moment, he feels a little lost. Besides meat, he desires vegetables, since he knows they are very important for a balanced diet. Nevertheless, despite being at such a high level, he has still not learned human transformation. There are 10 levels left until his next evolution, and he wonders if it will really take that long for him to learn how to become human. Suddenly, he hears a strange sound coming from ahead. When he looks, he thinks it is just an ordinary bear, but upon closer observation, he realizes that he has never seen anything like it before. It is a bear made of clay, something extremely unusual. Curious, he tries to analyze the monster's attributes, but his status display indicates that the creature is too far away for an accurate reading. As he moves closer, he confirms his suspicions. It is a clay bear, a rank D monster, made entirely of clay, extremely powerful, and with great regenerative ability. Upon further analysis, he realizes that the monster is at the same level as him. Watching it carefully, he believes that he can defeat it. If he manages to do so, he will be able to freely shape the clay and fire it. When he attacks the beast, it skillfully defends itself using clay spikes, forcing the dragon to retreat after a few blows. By observing the enemy's health bar, he realizes that there is still a lot of energy left. In addition, the creature has the same regeneration ability as the previous monster. He tries to use his speed-based attack to defeat it, but even when he lands a hit, the monster regenerates once again. From this, he understands that he can defeat it if he continues reducing its movement points. However, when he tries to attack once more, the creature summons a powerful sandstorm. The dragon is left in shock, as he did not imagine that a monster of that type would have such a terrifying power. In the midst of the storm, the beast ends up transforming. which he understands as a kind of trick. Now, he realizes that he will not be able to hit it with the rolling attack, causing his initial strategy to completely fall apart. Even so, he notices that the beast's MP is decreasing rapidly, which means that there is still a chance of victory. Soon after, the creature launches an attack. The dragon dodges with relative ease, remaining cautious, and counterattacks with precision, tearing off the beast's arm. He realizes that the clay becomes much weaker when separated from the main body. Using this to his advantage, he shapes the torn-off clay as if it were a sphere and strikes it with meteorite, blowing apart half of the monster's body. After defeating the creature, the dragon gains another 150 experience points, in addition to 150 extra bonus points. With that, he rises from level 30 to level 33 and unlocks the Nutcracker skill upon striking the beast. Despite the battle having been extremely difficult, he finally obtains the clay he wanted to decorate his home. After that, he sets out in search of more meat and some vegetables. Upon reaching the forest, he finds an extremely nutritious mushroom, but also a poisonous one, capable of causing paralysis for a long period of time. Since he does not have resistance to this poison, he decides to discard it. Continuing his search, he encounters a carnivorous plant, manages to defeat it, realizes that it contains many nutrients, and decides to take it home. The scene shifts once again to the same girl, who ends up deciding to go out alone through the forest. Ignoring her friend's advice, she mentally apologizes to Marielle for doing this and breaking her trust, even though she had promised that she would call the guild staff to help her. Even knowing that the chances of finding the man are minimal, she decides to look for him anyway. After all, some fishermen claim to have seen him passing through the forest, and even with only a 1% chance of finding him, she chooses to move forward. Determined to try to save her friend's life, she understands that if she had stopped the two of them from the beginning, perhaps none of this would have happened in this way. This thought weighs heavily on her mind, making guilt try to take over. Still, she knows that there is no point in continuing to punish herself for something that can no longer be changed. Taking a deep breath, she decides to move forward, walking through the dense forest in the hope of finding Daz alive. Each step is taken carefully, her senses alert to any strange movement around her. When she least expects it, she is suddenly surprised by a monster that appears abruptly among the trees. Frightened, but reacting on instinct, she manages to launch her fire strike in time to defend herself. After the attack, her heart races, and she realizes just how nervous she is. With that, she understands that she needs to calm down quickly, because acting under tension would only increase the chances of making fatal mistakes. The scene then returns to the dragon, who ends up encountering a rank D monster while exploring the region. As time passes, the creature begins to display increasingly aggressive behavior. However, he knows that if he manages to defeat it, the monster will end up transforming into a vegetable with a flavor very similar to meat. This information sparks his culinary curiosity, and soon he starts imagining that he could prepare a beautiful ramen using all the ingredients he has been gathering so far. While thinking about this, he looks to the side and ends up finding something even more surprising. A ranka mushroom. It is an extremely valuable item, known for its incredibly rare potential. If someone managed to cultivate it successfully, it would be possible to revitalize an entire nation whose economy was in decline. The dragon is genuinely impressed by that discovery, since he could earn an absurd amount of money from it in the future. However, he also remembers that this mushroom has extremely dangerous hallucinogenic properties, capable of causing a strong sensation of euphoria. About 500 years ago, it was discovered that it could be ground up and mixed with stimulant drugs, which ended up creating a huge number of addicts and causing serious social problems. Aware of this, he decides to store the mushroom carefully, without making immediate use of it. Moving forward in his exploration, he finds a tree loaded with ripe fruits. Without hesitation, he decides to harvest all of them, making the most of that opportunity and not leaving a single one behind. Meanwhile, in another part of the forest, the girl continues desperately searching for her friend. After walking for some more time, she decides that she will take just one more round through the area, and if she does not find any sign of him, she plans to return home before night falls. The scene returns once again to the protagonist, who has finally managed to gather all the ingredients needed to cook. Carefully, he prepares a soup so well made that the aroma alone is enough to make one's mouth water. After devouring a huge bowl of the soup, he feels deep satisfaction and receives the title of Mr. Cook, which rises from level 1 to level 3. Even so, he realizes that drinking directly from the bowl is not the most practical or comfortable way. Thinking about improving his quality of life, he decides that he will create a hammock or some kind of appropriate utensil to make meals easier in the future. The scene shifts to the next day, when a group of people travels in a carriage along the main road. They are the adventurers that the guild sent to investigate the place where the man had disappeared. Everyone looks alert and prepared for any unexpected situation that might arise during the mission. Then, the story returns to the protagonist, who is hunting various types of wolves, mainly taking advantage of the creature's hides. However, when he returns to the forest where he had left his supplies, he is faced with an irritating situation. A group of monkeys is devouring all of his dried meat. He knows that if he leaves the place even for a moment, they will eat everything. With no alternatives, he understands that he needs to deal with this as quickly as possible and begins to think about creating some kind of potion to handle those monkeys efficiently. After continuing to hunt for some more time through the forest, he ends up coming across a monster he had never seen before. The creature has a strange and intimidating appearance. When he least expects it, he is attacked by surprise. Luckily, he manages to dodge at the very last instant, avoiding a direct blow. Even so, he does not come out unscathed. He ends up taking a heavy impact, loses his balance, falls to the ground, and passes out. The beast remains there, watching the unconscious protagonist and letting out a disturbing laugh, as if it were enjoying the entire situation. Upon awakening, the dragon realizes that he is perfectly oriented, without any mental confusion or loss of consciousness. This surprises him. Considering what had happened moments earlier, he begins to wonder whether special poisons truly differ so much from common poisons or whether, in the end, they all follow the same principle. Soon after, the familiar status window appears before his eyes, informing him that the ability to view statistics does not provide very detailed data when it is only at level 3. The dragon had already expected this answer, since he knew that his current limitations were still many. Thinking more carefully, he realizes that he did not see any plant capable of neutralizing the poison that had affected him. This realization makes him uneasy, causing him to question how he could resolve that situation on his own. As he rummages through his memories, trying to organize everything he had learned up to that point, he remembers that he could obtain some additional information by analyzing the lizard that had attacked him. It is then explained, through the system, that it is a poisonous Lacerda princess, rank D. A cunning monster, known for poisoning its prey and only feeding on the remains after the poison has fully taken effect. The dragon wonders, with a certain disbelief, whether that had really happened to him. The status continues by detailing that, after ingesting extremely toxic substances, this creature is capable of internally producing an even more powerful poison. Its bodily fluids can function as an antidote to the very poison it generates, and it usually uses this as a bargaining chip to preserve its life when it ends up captured by stronger enemies. With this information, the dragon understands that he needs to capture the caterpillar alive in order to obtain the antidote. As he gets up, he notices that he can move without great difficulty, thanks to his natural resistance to poison. Even so, when he begins to run, he realizes that the creature may be nearby, patiently waiting for the right moment to attack him again. Still, he decides to take the risk, as he sees no other option. Looking ahead, he spots the lizard. Using his rolling skill, the dragon quickly realizes that the creature is also capable of performing the same movement. Soon after, he tries to repeat the attack he had used against the spider earlier, believing that it would work once more. However, he ends up colliding with the same wooden log that the caterpillar usually uses as support, falling awkwardly to the ground. When he looks back, he realizes that it can attack while rolling, something he had not anticipated. After noticing this, the dragon begins to use his ability with greater caution, dodging the caterpillar's strikes while trying to guide it into a favorable position. Little by little, he manages to lead it to the riverbank and, with a calculated movement, causes the creature to fall into the water. However, he knows that if it is eliminated at that moment, he will lose his only chance to obtain the antidote. Thus, he decides to focus on the river to save it, using his fire strike in a controlled manner to bring it back to the surface. When he sees the creature right in front of him again, the dragon believes that he is already dead due to the poison accumulated in his body and ends up fainting. The scene shifts to Myria, who walks through the forest with careful steps and ends up hearing her friend's voice calling out. Marielle wonders where the girl is, looking around with concern, but soon hears Myria in the distance. Myria asks if she was looking for her, and the girl replies that yes, she was. Since she had not seen her for a long time, she became worried and went to her house, but did not find her there. Because of that, she asks what Myria was doing alone in the forest. She replies that she had been bedridden with a mild cold, but decided to go out for a walk when she began to feel better. Marielle only asks that she not walk alone through the woods, as it is dangerous, and explains that she received a notice from the guild, asking that Myria not worry so much about certain matters. The scene returns to the dragon, who begins to wonder where he is as he regains consciousness. He soon remembers that he had been poisoned and goes on alert. Looking ahead, he sees the same lizard calmly staring at him. He asks, in his thoughts, whether the caterpillar was waiting to kill him, but he realizes that he does not feel any pain at all. Confused, he wonders if it gave him an antidote, and the caterpillar replies that yes, it did. Then, the dragon picks it up in his arms, somewhat hesitantly, to thank it for having saved him. Despite the intense battle they had, he expresses the desire for them to become friends. The dragon comments that, after so much effort and suffering, he realized that perhaps they are kindred souls. When he looks at it more closely, he notices that the caterpillar is, in a way, actually quite cute. Upon arriving home, he offers food to it and feels happy to finally have company during meals. Observing more carefully, the dragon realizes that neither of them has a real name, only titles linked to their species: young plague dragon and poisonous creature. Even though they are merely classifications, he decides not to think about names and prefers that both continue like that. Even so, he does not mind calling it simply you. Over time, he realizes that it has grown quite attached to him. In this way, they end up becoming each other's first friends. He says that, if it wants, it can stay and live with him without restrictions. The dragon then explains to the caterpillar that that strange liquid is the special poison that he himself produced. Seeing it eating without any fear, he comments that it could be fatal for most creatures. Soon after, he remembers that it has high resistance, so there is no reason for concern. Seeing how much it seems to like it, he decides to try a little himself and immediately realizes that it is extremely poisonous, causing his poison skill to rise from level 4 to level 5. The scene moves forward to the next day, when both of them fight together to grow stronger and defeat enemies more easily. After each battle, they grow even closer and begin to act in perfect sync to obtain food. They sleep together, and as he observes the caterpillar's face while it rests, the dragon realizes how easy it is to forget that it possesses a deadly poison. Even so, he asks it not to bite him while he sleeps, although that seems to be something almost instinctive for it. On the following day, the dragon decides to eat fruits and offers some to the caterpillar, but notices that it does not like them at all. Without hesitation, it jumps from his shoulder to look for something poisonous and ends up finding a cadaver mushroom, rank B, a fungus that exudes the smell of a corpse and possesses a powerful poison, something that practically no animal would dare to consume. Looking ahead, the dragon realizes that the caterpillar is almost drooling with the desire to eat it. However, he does not allow it, stating that if it eats it, it will end up with a horrible smell. The caterpillar becomes quite irritated by the refusal. The dragon even thinks that he will be attacked, but it ends up revealing the presence of a two-headed enemy. As he observes it, he realizes that the creature possesses high attributes and abilities with frightening names, many of them involving gravity. He does not know exactly how to defeat that monster. Abilities such as tenacious and marking seem to serve to track targets, making escape almost impossible. When he looks at the caterpillar, the dragon realizes that both of them are thinking the same way at that moment. It begins to roll to attack. While he tries to land a direct punch, but ends up being pushed back by the brute strength of the beast. When he least expects it, the dragon receives a devastating gravitational blow and is almost defeated, being saved by the caterpillar at the very last instant. As he uses his fire strike, he realizes that the monster possesses a terrifying regeneration ability, something that seems to come from another world. When the creature prepares to use gravity once again, the dragon runs in to attack, but ends up being bitten. Even so, he takes advantage of the opening to punch the enemy while the caterpillar applies its poison. The beast manages to heal itself once more, but its strength begins to visibly decline. The dragon recognizes the effect of the poison, as he has already experienced it before and knows how heavy and debilitating it can be. Happy, the dragon begins to celebrate internally. Believing that victory is finally within his reach, his heart races as he realizes that the enemy no longer shows the same strength as before. In the midst of these thoughts, he reflects that he would never wish to evolve into something like a two-headed dragon. To him, that form seemed unnatural, as if it were the result of an existence forced to keep living at any cost. When he checks the enemy's status, he understands the reason it is still standing: the sacrifice ability. The beast is capable of tearing off one of its own heads to prevent the poison from spreading through its body, surviving at the cost of an absurd amount of pain. Before he can fully react, the monster attacks with extreme speed, surprising even the dragon. By instinct, he throws himself to the side and manages to dodge by a hair's breadth, feeling the cutting wind pass close to his body. The two begin to exchange numerous blows in succession, each impact echoing through the forest. Even so, the dragon starts to gain the upper hand. Taking advantage of an opening, he lands a precise punch that sends the enemy flying into the air without giving the creature time to recover. He ends the fight with a powerful MMA strike, smashing the beast's body against the ground and putting a definitive end to the combat. However, the feeling of victory does not last long. The dragon becomes extremely apprehensive when he realizes that his friend does not respond in any way. The silence around him becomes suffocating. Overwhelmed by fear, he feels something he has never experienced before. Desperate, he makes a silent prayer, asking God not to grant him the ability to transform into a human or any other grand power. He begs only for her to be saved. Shortly after, his eyes widen when he notices several trails of blood scattered across the ground, which makes his heart sink even further. When he least expects it, she appears before him, gravely injured, with her body covered in deep marks. Before the dragon can react, the creature's other head suddenly appears, still alive. Consumed by rage and a protective instinct, he attacks without hesitation. Each blow is charged with pure fury, and the creature does not last long, being defeated in a brutal manner. As he takes his friend into his arms, the dragon realizes how badly hurt she is and feels a deep ache in his chest. At that exact moment, a new notification appears. He receives 234 skill points and unlocks the ability to transform into a human, a power that arrives along with emotions he still does not know how to deal with. The scene then shifts to the village, where the girls are talking calmly. One of them comments that she has just finished cleaning the entrance and the hallway, giving a final wipe to make sure everything was in order. She notes that they almost never receive visits from people outside the city and shows curiosity about what those people must be like. When she looks at the table, she notices the presence of a different book. The girl explains that she picked it up because she thought her friend would really like the content. As she opens the book, she comments that, to face the threats described there, one needs to become an adventurer and train a lot, perhaps for years, to have any real chance of survival. She emphasizes that monsters above rank B are extremely dangerous and that only heroes or saints are capable of facing them head-on. Then, the girl asks with curiosity about stone dragons. Her friend explains that these creatures are normally rank C, but that they can become even stronger if they evolve, which makes them even more dangerous. Because of that, she asks her to be careful and avoid going into the forest without necessity. Suddenly, noises are heard outside, indicating that the adventurers have finally arrived at the village, bringing with them stories, risks, and new possibilities. And thus ends another episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content. See you next week. Bye. The scene shifts to two girls walking along a dirt road halfway between the village and the forest. The atmosphere is calm, yet the tension of the mission is clearly perceptible in the air. One of them breaks the silence and questions her friend about the decision she made. She asks why she accepted a rank C mission with only an elf as her partner. Missions of that level are not simple, they require preparation, experience, and often a large group to handle unexpected situations. For someone still rising within the guild, it seemed like an unnecessary risk. She insists that it might have been wiser to wait for more members before venturing so deep into the forest. The other girl responds lightly, almost carefree. She says that if the two of them are together, everything will be easier. With a teasing smile, she adds that if the situation becomes truly bad, she can simply run away and leave her behind. Her friend immediately stops, irritated, and asks whether she would really abandon her to die. The girl laughs and says it was just a joke. Then she explains that, although it is classified as rank C, the mission does not involve defeating powerful monsters, but merely exploring the forest and gathering information. In theory, it should not be particularly dangerous. Then, in a more serious tone, she reminds her that they are searching for a person who may already be dead. The scene returns to moments earlier, when the two were still in the village, speaking with the one who requested the mission. The contractor shows surprise upon seeing an elf there, commenting that it is not common for an elf to live among humans in a small village like that. The young woman calmly replies that she is only half elf and introduces herself as Marielle. Her tone is firm, yet polite. Shortly afterward, Marielle asks that they not reveal the details of the mission to Miria. The person they are searching for is more dead than alive. He was part of Maria's group, and together they faced a stone dragon in a difficult battle. Since then, Miria has blamed herself for Daz's fate, believing she could have done something differently. Marielle suspects that, driven by guilt, Miria may have gone alone into the forest in search of him, something extremely dangerous. For that reason, she wants to discover the truth before a new tragedy occurs. The scene cuts to the dragon, who, after long efforts, managed to prepare effective medicines so that his caterpillar friend could fully recover. Satisfied with the result, he decides to leave the cave for a moment to check his attributes after leveling up. He knows he needs to move away, because if he were to perform his transformation into a human in front of the caterpillar, she might attack him by instinct. Moreover, he still does not feel inclined to return to the village and meet Miria again, fearing complications. Observing his reflection on the calm surface of a lake, he begins to imagine what his human form would look like. If he truly became human, what would he do? He does not wish to abandon the caterpillar. Yet he admits that living in a human village seems tempting. Perhaps he could alternate between the cave and the village every 3 days. The mere possibility of earning the human's trust excites him. With his heart racing in anticipation, he activates the transformation. The result, however, is far from what he had idealized. When he looks at his reflection again, he feels disappointed. He considers himself even uglier than before. He becomes irritated with the system, as the human form does not match the image he had imagined. To make matters worse, when checking his attributes, he realizes that his attack and defense have been reduced by half. The transformation brings social advantages, but weakens his combat power. Frustrated and irritated, he cancels the transformation and remains dejected for a few moments. The narrative returns to the two girls, now walking through the dense forest. The environment is too silent, which makes them even more alert. Ahead of them, they find the entrance to a cave. Near the entrance, there are impressive sculptures. One represents a dragon, and the other appears to be a human figure. The half-elf observes carefully and concludes that it could only have been made with powerful magic. The surrounding scenery is unsettling. Pieces of meat are scattered across the ground, suggesting that something large and predatory lives there. Even so, they decide to enter cautiously. To their surprise, the interior of the cave is illuminated and surprisingly organized. It does not resemble the chaotic lair of an ordinary beast. They even find a pot containing still fresh fruit, which indicates unusual habits. Suddenly, they come face to face with a caterpillar. The creature, frightened, quickly hides in the shadows. The tension rises. The girl concludes that they need to leave immediately. Outside, the dragon watches the two of them entering his home. He wonders whether they are human, since one appears only half human. He imagines that they must be impressed by the organization of the cave. He knows, however, that if he appears in his dragon form, he will be seen only as a monster. He decides to use the human transformation once again. When he appears before them, he tries to introduce himself in a peaceful manner. However, the girls are startled by his sudden appearance. Instinctively, they attack and flee from the cave as fast as they can. At a safe distance, they discuss whether they should return to the village and report what they saw. They are in shock upon discovering that dragons are living in that forest. The girl decides that it is better not to spread the information immediately. They will report to the guild so that a larger team can investigate safely. She asks whether they should leave the forest and call their usual group. Her friend agrees, stating that they will make contact as soon as possible. The next day, the dragon wakes up discouraged, considering the incident a complete disaster. Upon returning to the cave, he asks the caterpillar for a favor. There is a troop of monkeys that keeps stealing his dried meat, and he has decided to teach them a lesson. The caterpillar prepares a potent poison for him to mix into the meat as a trap. They wait until one of the monkeys falls for the bait. When they realize the poisoning, the monkeys become enraged and call for reinforcements. Then the leader of the troop appears, enormous and imposing. The dragon immediately recognizes that it is a monster of higher classification. Upon checking its status, he discovers that it is rank D+, an evolved form of orangutan that defeated the former alpha to assume leadership. Among them, evolving through battles is considered something sacred. In addition, the leader commands support magic that strengthens the entire clan. The dragon unleashes a powerful fireball, but the monkeys create a defensive barrier that blocks the attack. Immediately afterward, they advance as a group. With the caterpillar's support, he defeats some enemies, but the leader manages to grab the caterpillar and hurl her against a tree. Fortunately, the dragon catches her before the impact. In that moment, he understands that if the battle continues in that manner, both of them will die. Remembering a newly acquired telepathy skill, he attempts to negotiate. He asks the leader to calm his subordinates and offers the antidote prepared by the caterpillar in exchange for a truce. The orangutan responds coldly that such a proposal is out of the question. They represent too great a threat to be ignored. It is better to eliminate them now, even if it costs a few casualties. The dragon argues that if they keep fighting, no one will leave alive. In his view, the monkeys only know how to resolve conflicts through death. Even so, the leader pretends to accept the proposal, while the caterpillar applies the antidote to the poison monkey. Everything proves to be a trap. Taking advantage of the distraction, they kidnap the caterpillar. The leader's true objective is to force a direct duel, a one-on-one confrontation. The clash begins brutally. The orangutan throws the dragon far away and maintains an incessant offensive. The dragon retreats, seeking space and analyzing his opponent's rhythm. When the leader advances again, he activates his charge ability, leaps with precision, and delivers a strike that drives the monster's foot into the ground. Seizing the opening, he executes an impressive sequence of attacks, drastically reducing the enemy's vitality. When he attempts to deliver the final blow, he is caught off guard by a violent counterattack and thrown backward. Before his eyes, the leader of the monkeys evolves once more, strengthening himself with the power gained in battle. The confrontation, which was already dangerous, has just reached an even more threatening level. Amid an intense and brutal exchange of blows, the dragon begins to lose the advantage he had gained. His movements are no longer as precise as before, and fatigue weighs heavily on every muscle. In a moment of carelessness, the leader of the monkeys seizes the opening and lands a direct punch to his stomach. The impact is devastating, forcing the air out of his lungs as pain spreads throughout his body. Even so, despite feeling that his strength is at its limit, he advances once more, determined not to retreat. The orangutan, equally wounded, also refuses to yield. The two begin exchanging punches in succession, each impact echoing through the forest like the sound of wood splitting apart. The ground beneath their feet cracks, the surrounding trees tremble, and the other monkeys watch in tense silence. There is no longer any refined strategy, only brute force, endurance, and determination. The fight reaches a critical point. Both are exhausted, barely able to remain standing. Their breathing is heavy, their bodies covered in marks from the battle. it becomes evident that whoever lands the next decisive blow will emerge victorious. There will be no second chance. Gathering the last of his strength, the dragon concentrates everything he has left into a single movement. With a hoarse roar, he advances and delivers one final, precise punch, striking the leader of the monkeys squarely. The impact is enough to bring him down. The enormous body of the orangutan crashes to the ground with force, raising dust and dry leaves. For a brief instant, the dragon believes he has won. At that moment, a system notification appears before him. His dragon strike ability has evolved from level 2 to level 3. The information flashes before his eyes, confirming the growth achieved through battle. However, before he can even process the achievement, the leader of the monkeys, driven by pure instinct and willpower, rises in one last desperate effort. With what remains of his energy, the orangutan lands a direct blow to the dragon's face. The impact makes his vision spin, the world around him distort. His balance is completely lost. Without strength to continue, both of them collapse almost at the same time, defeated by their own limits. Even unconscious, the system continues to function. A new notification appears, confirming that he has gained enough experience points to rise from level 37 to level 39. Despite his critical condition and absolute exhaustion, the battle has brought significant rewards. The confrontation has not only strengthened his body, but also elevated his abilities to a new level. The forest slowly returns to silence, marked by the scars of combat. And thus another episode comes to an end. If you enjoyed the story and wish to follow the upcoming events, leave your support and continue accompanying this journey. See you next week. Until then.